Toastmasters Club with David Heppard.
Yeah.
Look it out, Karen. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. What I want to do is I want to share with you this little spoken word piece that I wrote when I was in '99, when I was at rock bottom. And so, and also in there I reference a term called Buck Rogers release date. And for those that don't know what a Buck Rogers release date, it's when you have a release date that's so far in the future, it's like science fiction. Right? And which is in reference to my situation and circumstances. I went to the penitentiary when I was 16 years old. They gave me 60 years, exceptional sentence. It was the early 90s. In living in Hillary Clinton's super predator world. Yeah. The kids are getting too violent, adult time for adult crime, and they're handing out time like Halloween candy. Yeah. So, with that being said, it gets so deep. Who knew death had a face in the shape of a Buck Rogers release? I fiend to be free, but I'm left to ponder in the best of this beast until I'm resting in peace. I'm destined to be tested. Obsessed with the streets because it happens to be the only place where I haven't been neglected. I get so weak in the knees every time I see my mama, weeping her pleas, but through the drama I discover she don't love me like my older brother. Witness me bleed. Is there a place I don't have to kick back and read faces, give dap, and no longer have to wonder if the fingerprints match the knife up in my slit back? I sit condemned to these troubled spaces, dig that. I struggle through struggles that'll blow the average nigga wig back. I suffer through troubles that'll make me question why I did that. Staring at the stripes on my shoulders, wondering if it's something that I can give back. The pain and the misery, the shame of my history. I was a celebrity on my block, but a stain on my family tree. I long to be free, free from the pain and free from the game and free from the drama, free from my being knee deep in the trauma. I long to be free. How wrong would I be to get down on my knees and plead for help for something stronger than me? I long to be free. Now, Now I wanted to do it because it was so old, but it kind of encapsulated my mindset at the time and what my struggle at the time and my demons and what I was going through. And I really wanted to really talk about my rock bottom and the circumstances surrounding when I wrote this as well. So at the time, I was on a 2-year IMU program, and for those that don't know what that is, that's 2 years in solitary confinement. I was in there for assaulting an individual who was incarcerated for killing one of my partners. And during the altercation, I assaulted staff as well when they tried to break it up. And so that was the circumstances. They're ringing bells. I'm ringing bells. See that? And so, so that was happening. And on top of that, this, in Walla Walla, the COs in the cell extraction beat the brakes off me, like beat me the inch of my life, right? And so what they do is they have a camera to videotape it, all cell extractions. And they stood in front of the camera, and I was already cuffed up, pepper sprayed, all that. And they just beat me, and they stood in front of the camera hollering out, "He's resisting." That's the gimmick, that's the game, that's how they do you. And so they beat me, and then they cut my clothes off, threw me in a strip cell. And you know, a strip cell is, they strip everything out of the cell, no sheets, no clothes, nothing. They turn the water off. And so when they put me in there, I had to use the toilet bowl water to get the blood and the pepper spray out my face. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, oh yeah, it gets better. That is the year where I got my mandate back. And for those that are familiar with what that is, it's when all your appeals are exhausted. And after all your appeals are exhausted, they give you a mandate. And the mandate, so pretty much the time that they gave you is the time that you're going to have to do. And in my case, that was 60 years. And so I was having a pretty bad year. Let's say that. But I want to explain that because I also want to explain that in my life and in my experience, I can't speak for everybody, but rock bottoms didn't work for me. That didn't inspire change for me. I was horrible upbringing, came up in a crazy environment, aggressive all the way through, the violence and, having all my dead partners before we left out our teens. I mean, you deal with a lot of trauma, you deal with a lot of tragedy, and it seems like you get numb to it. It seems like your pain tolerance gets up. And it seems like when you come up in an environment that's toxic masculinity and this hyper-patriarchy, right, where it's soft to do anything else but accept it and just go with it. Because that was the only acceptable emotion that I was allowed to have was either anger, and that was it. I don't think I had any other one. It's pretty
right.
Even when you're happy, you're mad.
Right.
You're like, yeah, look, I got that to you. Even when you're happy, you're mad. So you think about it. It's crazy, but it's real. And so that's the environment I came from. And the reality is it could have got worse, and it could have kept getting worse, and it was getting worse, and that would never have changed me. Because I accepted that. I'm dealing with my shame. I'm still a person, and the reality is my horrible choices make me feel like I deserve my lot in life. And plus, at the end of the day, I never received empathy in my life. Every teacher, every adult, everybody gave me negative feedback. And I believed it. And so the reality was that would have never worked for me. What it took for me was being incarcerated. There was a couple that came into the institution, and they showed me empathy. They came through one of those programs. It was like Kairos. They got me there with the food. They feed you and stuff like that. And I was about to sign me up. And I went. And it was transformative for me, though, because they showed me empathy, though, like real empathy. They didn't want no strings attached. They was like writing me. They were sending me pictures of their vacations. They were treating me like family. And it kind of had me messed up in it, but when I started to actually see it and I couldn't find the angles, I couldn't see the ulterior motives, I had a paradigm shift. And it's like in philosophy, right? In philosophy where they say, if all you see is black crows, then you can make the assumption that all crows are black, right? But if you just see one white crow, you don't need to see 20 white crows or 1,000 white crows. All you gotta do is see one white crow, and then you know all crows aren't black. And that's what it was for me when it came to empathy. I seen it, and I came from a world where it wasn't visible. I've never seen it had a healthy relationship. Everything around me was toxic and violent. And then when I was shown empathy, it was transformative for me because my world changed. Now I seen that the world looked different, that it wasn't what I thought. Everybody wasn't have ulterior motives. It wasn't cutthroat as I thought it was. I wasn't as jaded as I was. And that kind of started cracking it down. And when my wife came back in my life, she was, when I was a kid, I came in when I was 16, and we were both young, and at the end of the day, it was on and off because the weight of my time is tough for anybody to handle, especially somebody that young, and it was what it was. But when she came back in 2000, that was pretty significant for me because I was institutionalized at the time. Before that, I cut everybody off. Everybody in the outside world. And I did that purposely because I was like, my life over. This is 60 years. And I knew who I had to be when I got up in there. I'm from the block. And I know, in the penitentiary, it's just the same thing, but it's on steroids. And so I understood that about myself. And I understood, and to be real, I thought she may be soft. Let's be real. Right? Because I couldn't covet these considerations of going to the hole, not being able to call, and all these other things. And the person that I was that she seen, I definitely couldn't be that guy. And I understood that. It was a calculation going in as a child. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have told you at the time, but I was scared to death. And I understood what had to happen, and so I did that. I was ultra aggressive, and it was what it was. So the thing was, so she came back, and she gave me glimpses of what the streets looked like again, and made me consider them again. Now, it was still tough because I wasn't going home. But the reality was, I seen past this institutionalized thinking that made me comfortable. Because let's be real, being institutionalized when you have a lot of time is safe. When this is your own reality and you don't have to make considerations about what's happening on the street, who's dying, who can't pay their rent, and all this other stuff, when you're not holding these type of considerations, your time is a whole lot easier. But you become so institutionalized that it hurts your spirit. And that's just the reality of it. And so, rock bottom didn't work, but empathy worked, compassion worked. And as I started to turn the corner, I started signing up for everything. I had too much time. They wouldn't let me take any type of academic programming as far as schooling and that concern.
Right.
What classes I could take, I did take. I had to really self-educate. I had to find out what they learned in business, when they go to college for it. I had to find out what the textbooks were. Went down, we got an interlibrary loan program, I'm reading. And so I'm really have to self-teach myself. And that's what ended up really happening. But what ended up happening too was I got to start mentoring guys. And that started adding like I had value to give, right? And that was the missing piece because my whole life I didn't feel like I had value. So it was quick for me to sacrifice my body for the team because I didn't feel like I had value to give. It was easy to do that. And so all these things started to happen. Plus when my guy got out and he had a daughter and he made me the goddad. It was big for me. You know, I didn't have kids. I went in when I was really young. And because of my, Buck Rogers release date, it wasn't forthcoming. And so I couldn't entertain that. And so, him and his baby mother really made me a part of that child's life, which was big for me and gave me an extra incentive to be of something of value to be able to give this child, right? And so I have all these moving pieces working for me, and that's what facilitated me to make the necessary changes. The reality is I had 60 years. I turned the corner about 16 years ago. And by the grace of God, in 2014, because of the juvenile research that came out, the law changes, the 5064 bill came out, which allowed for people that were convicted as juveniles to petition for their release after 20 years. 2014 was my 20th year. I petitioned for my release. And because, now I started out horrible, but because I had so much time, it really helped me. It really ended up helping me because there was a contrast. And you can see the contrast where I couldn't go a day without fighting. And I did all these IMU programs, and then you see I was in no trouble. And I'm going to every program I could take advantage of, and Toastmasters and all these productive programs that really benefited me and gave me an opportunity to help mentor and help people with the release plans and stuff like that. And it really, and so when I filed petitions, the assessments and all that other stuff, psych evaluations to make sure I ain't going, it's not a gimmick, it's not a gag. I went in front of the parole board and they granted me release. And it was a beautiful thing. And on my way out, there was this program that I took, the Freedom Project programming they have. And I took that when I was on the inside. And then when I got released, I volunteered when I got out. And then they hired me. And it was crazy, they hired me to do social media marketing. And I was in the box for 24 years. I ended up doing 24 years. I don't know nothing about no social media. But I was real. I was honest. I was like, I know marketing because I was studying marketing and business and stuff when I was incarcerated. And I was like, listen, anything you need me to do as far as Facebook or whatever you need me to navigate, Twitter, I'll YouTube it. We'll figure it out. But as far as my ability to be able to script a message, that's me. I'm your guy, right? They hired me though. They gave me a shot. It did well. We grew, and then after some time, we started programs. We're doing all type of different stuff and making all. We started the Safe Return program, really investing in reentry, helping people carry people on all the way through, shoulder to shoulder support on the way out, and then now they promoted me to be the executive director, and it's right. And so the blessing is in it's never too late to do the right thing.
Right.
Right? It's never too late to do the right thing. I thought it was over. And I really want you to consider what that feels like emotionally, because I did 24 years, and 20 of them I did thinking I was never going to go home. And after 99, when I got my mandate, I had to emotionally come to terms with that. Like, listen, this is a wrap. You might have had some fantasy about an appeal, you catching because everything went wrong with my stuff. But so you're thinking some type of technicality, you don't know what's going to happen. But the reality is that was gone, and I dealt with it by not dealing with it, right? You don't think about that. because that's too traumatic for me. You know what I mean? And so what I do is I put my focus in on becoming a better me. I put my focus in on all these different things and not really trying to hold a consideration for the fact, like, listen, you're going to die in this box. You're going to die doing count. You're going to die having to eat these boats. Remember the boats came out? Oh, that was horrible. Like, for real. But this was my reality. And this is what I thought was always going to be. But it wasn't, though. And it really wasn't. And so, and what I needed was, I needed an example. Because that's what I forgot to tell you. There was a guy that turned his life around in 20 years. And he was a hitter, too. Like, I viewed myself, though. You know, that's why I used to always do that. It's not just anybody that can just get locked up and then come back and feel like he's going to be credible, right? I know some of us feel like we different, right? Like we go a little harder than the next guy might go. And so we might other them. Or like, well, you're not, you know, you kind of square, bro. So, I mean, of course you made it. Right? Right, but that's how I think it. And it might be backwards, but that's how cats used to think. That's how I used to think. Especially when I was deep in my mess. Right? But I seen a guy, and he was with it. And he turned his life around. And he used to come inside the institution, and I went down. He was interactive transition. He was coming up there to facilitate that, and I had to go check him out. And I was poking and prodding, and I'm like, man, well, he just kept it real. Like, his first thing, every time he go in the room, he say, can I be real? And he just talk how he talk. All the little proper stuff that he do on the way in, he throws to the wayside, and he just come real. And he keep it real with us. And so I needed that. I needed a real life example because I really didn't believe it was possible. I really put myself in a category where I would feel like, listen, I'm a throwaway, right? I felt that way because I was told that at every stage of the process. And I started to believe that. And I acted that way. You know, a person that doesn't believe he's worthy of forgiveness will act like a person that's not worthy of forgiveness, right? But as soon as some people came in my life that treated me differently and actually cared, and made me believe that I was worthy of it, I acted as such. Because I found my value.
Right.
Like, I do have value. It don't matter if I'm not going home. It don't matter if I'll never have a family conventionally or whatever. I had to put it in terms like, listen, I have value to give. And that was the big component to my change. And that's why I'm so passionate about going back inside. That's why I appreciate everybody that's with the movement. It's because that's where it's at, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? Part of it is some survivor's remorse on my part. I can't front about that. It is. I used to walk the big yard with some of these guys. I used to eat chow, and we used to really talk about it and go through it together. And these guys aren't going home. These guys weren't kids when they got incarcerated. Some of them were 18. You know what I mean? Some of them missed it by 3 months. But the reality is they're in there, and they got 99 years. And they got to sit with that unless another change in the law comes through. And so that's the reality of it, is trying to figure out how can we add value, how can we fix I would say a broke system, but it's not broke. It's working exactly how it's supposed to work. It's a well-oiled machine. And so how do we dismantle that? How do we inspire those that are in there to make the necessary adjustments so that they can have what we have? You know what I mean? Because that's the biggest thing is out here is I'm really figuring out that it's not just that people don't want to change, and it's not just about resources. What it is really about is this stigma. That stigma stops more people from changing than anything else. And I promise you that. That was the last hurdle that I needed to get over when I was incarcerated was, you want to change, but will it matter? Will it matter if I change? What if I do everything right and I'm seeing how they blast us on the news. I see how they talk about us. I see how they got us labeled and framed. And so the reality is, like, do I even have a fair shot? Like, would it matter? This is safe. You know what I mean? I know these guys. And these guys are going to show me love even if it's negative and even if it's not the right way. But the reality is I know I got acceptance here. And so that's a monster that I'm really passionate about changing, too, is that stigma. That's why I appreciate these type of platforms. You know what I mean? Leave it open for everybody to come. It's not just for us, but it's hopefully for somebody else to catch a story and understand that we're people that had trauma, childhoods, and all these situations that created a circumstance where we believed it was okay to do whatever we did. You know what I mean? And so with that being said, I appreciate your time. I appreciate this event. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate y'all's support. And thank you for your time. And here's Karen.